So, my spoiled little sister, she gets away with everything. Well, this time she got herself a little bit in over her head. She doesn't think that she can help herself in this situation, so she came to me. Well, I'm not helping her. And I told her and my parents this. Have you ever had the feeling that there's someone who came into this life solely and exclusively to ruin your existence? Well, I do. In my particular case, it's my sister Olivia, who, from the first day she came into this world, has made my life so miserable. Although, that would be giving her too much credit since my parents were the ones who contributed to most of this. She was born when I was 3 years old, and since then my parents have spoiled and pampered her so much it's absolutely ridiculous. When I was 8, I asked them for a box of metallic crayons. I saw a commercial and totally fell in love with them, I recall it. To start my own way in the world of drawing and painting. And you know what they did? They preferred to buy a dollhouse for my sister, just because she saw it in a mall once. It was something like, "Mom, buy me this little impulse, and don't give my sister something that can change her life." And I say that because after several years of introspective analysis, I realized that my parents were indeed to blame for denying me too many that would have helped me in the future, just to fulfill my sister's whims. The worst thing is that this attitude degenerated into a person who is quite superficial, and to whom you can't say no. Olivia is the most unbearable being in the world. At school, she was one of those spoiled, popular kids who would cry to mommy and daddy to have anything right at the moment, not caring about our money issues. While she stomped and screamed for a new phone, I suffered from having to start out in the working world with part-time jobs to pay off some school debt, copies, and books I needed. Although, I kept some money set aside for college. I remember once going through one of those biggest hassles of my life when I walked into my room and was going to put some cash in my piggy bank, and discovered that my piggy bank felt quite light. Well, when I asked about it, my mother said she had, quote, taken some, so she could finish paying for a holiday camp that they enrolled Olivia in. A camp I've wanted to stay in years ago, but they had told me it was far too expensive. Of course, my mother paid me later, but it made me feel bad to have to charge my own mother. Although I would have felt worse if I let them walk all over me like that. I think one of the worst things Olivia did to me was during our high school years when we went to a party together, which I didn't want her to go to because I didn't want to be babysitting my younger sister. But she insisted. My parents can't say no to her, so I ended up in a huge house with her being the center of attention. Olivia was super popular, while I tried to be more inconspicuous, so she might as well be on the dance floor while my friends and I hung out at the bar corner. For quite some time, I was interested in a guy, Michael, who was studying with me as one of the cutest guys in the room. I knew he was attracted to me, and we hit it off that night. To my surprise, after coming out of the bathroom with my friends, I found Michael French kissing Olivia. I wanted to be buried alive. Everyone knew I liked him, including my parents, and the sight of my little sister stealing my boy was the straw that broke the camel's back. I went months without talking to her, and she wouldn't even admit the guilt. Do you know what my parents' response was? "Honey, you've liked that boy for years. You should have moved a little faster with that one." What kind of parents say such a disgusting thing like that? They were justifying their youngest daughter's promiscuity and degenerating their oldest for not, quote, moving on fast enough. In what kind of sick dimension am I in? Well, in the same way, I have so many anecdotes to tell, but I don't know if I should tell them in their entirety. I'm doing this only to purge myself a bit so I can get rid of all my weight I have. My sister is about to graduate from college and will be able to enter the working world that she has avoided for so many years. And I'll love to see her trying because she has always been so spoiled that she didn't even know how to cook a simple pasta. And now she'll know what real life is once and for all. I'll be telling you in the future how she's doing. As for me, with my savings, I was able to get my own place in the center of the city, where I've been living on my own for a couple of years now. I'm not afraid to admit that it's been the best experience I've ever had in my life. To be able to have some peace without the constant onslaught of someone who shares your blood. I don't want to wax poeticness, but yeah, it feels great. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're enjoying your day. So, update number 1, it's a very big one. OP is very excited to tell this update because, well, it starts out like this. Okay, that's it. A big one just happened. A very big one. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you press that subscribe button for daily animated stories, and let's jump into update number 1. Okay, that's it. A big one just happened. A very big one. Olivia, the world's favorite daughter, ran off with her friends to an evening event at a mall. Nothing she hasn't done in the past. Turns out she took Daddy's car. They went, had some fun, and she left her friends at home. On the way back, her headlights started to fail. According to the version she told, something I don't quite believe. And instead of stopping to call someone, the very trusting girl decides to continue her trip with the lights off, in the middle of the darkness of the night. To her surprise, a driver who was passing by her just as she was about to make a crossing without her noticing it, ended up abruptly crashing into him. And instead of backing up, the very brute panicked and went further forward, aggravating the damage and hitting the other driver hard. The other driver suffered a broken right leg bone, somewhat severely from what I was told, and such was the crash that within minutes the scene would be flooded with people. Even though it was in the wee hours of the morning, various parties had to be persuaded not to make a big deal of the scene and get it in front of the page of the newspapers. I had never seen Olivia cry so hard in my life. They woke me up in the morning to tell me about the whole thing, and I had to make an appearance, finding a cab to the hospital at 4 a.m. They didn't care I had to work a few hours later. So, yeah, Olivia got hurt a bit too. But just a little cut here and there, no big deal really. But she just kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it won't happen again, did I kill that person?" I won't be able to live with that guilt. Almost going into a catatonic state despite the doctors, nurses, and ourselves telling her that the other person was fine. She was scolded in a private room where there were only the 4 of us in the family. Even though the outlook was dark, I could not help but feel a small twinge of satisfaction at seeing the spoiled sheep of the family being scolded and deserving all the punishment she finally deserved, since she was a baby. My mother turned red and my father barely spoke, trying to see how it would all be working out. Statements were asked to be made, and it would be a legal process. Depending on how the other side saw it, it could turn bitter. Olivia was licensed, although she had taken the car without permission. It was still for internal family use. The crudest part was that she had accelerated in panic, and that's what caused the damage to the other driver. That would generate too many questions. This all happened last week, but there is one slight tidbit of information that I've been missing all the time, which I learned within hours of the accident. They say sometimes that the world is like a grain of sand, and that coincidences are the bread and butter of life, and this is one of those occasions, huh? It turns out the other driver who hit Olivia is an old friend of mine, a classmate from my early college years, but who left during the first 2 semesters for a job offer, or some kind of trip, I don't really remember well. We were very close during the time. Although I never told him about my family, I honestly never touched the subject as I want to bring them into my life as little as possible. And when I got his name, I thought it was someone else. But it turned out to be him. As the nagging towards Olivia continued, I walked by his room, asking his family's permission to see him. He, despite all the commotion of the moment, was very happy to see me, and he said, I was just thinking about how that girl who broke my leg looked like someone, but I couldn't quite place it. Well, the boy's name is Jeremy, and he's very friendly. Even with having a half-destroyed leg and several bloody rags on the bed, he was still smiling. He explained that he was on his way from an outing to his girlfriend's house, and that the crash hit him like a bucket of cold water because of how surprising it was. He says that indeed Olivia's lights were out, but that doesn't eliminate the damage. He did not seem very angry, or at least he didn't show it with me in front of him, and he seemed to cool off when I explained that Olivia was my sister. He said, and I quote, I didn't know you had a sister. And I told him the whole situation, and I mean all of it. And the sense of my history with her, being the outcast of the family. After explaining my whole life, I felt bad for having him as my confession doll. I mean, the guy had broken a leg and I was the one crying. Oh, excuse me, I'm being called into the living room. I'll be commenting more on the situation tomorrow, because there's something big being planned. Something Jeremy and I are discussing. Well, and that can change my life forever. Update number 2. Well, good thing I didn't finish telling you everything yesterday because there's so much more I just learned. Okay, for context, my spoiled little sister hit a stranger, and now my family is in a legal dispute with him. The thing is, no one knows that the stranger is actually an old friend of mine, and with whom I've kept in touch ever since. Investigations were made and things don't look good for my sister. After some testing, it's confirmed that she had, the dose limit to be considered drunk. So the matter became more serious. In the case of paying the fine and compensation for the victim, this is when my plan entitled Family Revenge begins. You see, since it all happened, I've been talking to my friend Jeremy, who has had to put up with all my stories about the injustices that have happened throughout my life concerning Olivia. At times, I'm even a little embarrassed to tell him everything, as he plays my psychologist, saying that everything I've been through is horrible, and that I'm the one who should be compensated for it. Imagine, a guy with a leg in a cast feels sorry for me? Wow, that's low. However, we both came up with an idea. See, now what I'm about to tell you is supremely secret, and I'm exposing it here anonymously to show everyone that stories like this often happen in real life, not just in TV series or movies. I'm sorry that I might even get in big trouble for this, but here it goes, whatever. The victim, that is my friend Jeremy, has to be paid due to compensation. But after they did the math on reparations, professional attorney fees, destruction of property, and drunk driving collision, it all adds up to about $25,000, which seems like a lot to us. However, Jeremy's lawyers are very good, and they say they can even double that amount easily. So why would we want to do this? Easy, so I can take the rest. That's right. We'll get my family to give a larger settlement so that I can have some of that money, in fair retribution for all I've done in sacrifice for Olivia in my life, since I started working at about 15. I've had to give up much of my earnings to Olivia's stuff, masking it all as money for the house, according to my parents. To put in context, I always had to contribute at least 60% of my earnings, food, utilities, taxes, or a savings fund in case of eventualities. But those savings were usually Olivia's luxuries. Thus, this situation happens. So, I spent years complaining about it, But now there's an opportunity for me to get not my reward, but justice. This will serve as a lesson to both Olivia and my parents, and thus make my whole family open their eyes to stop letting her get away with it. I will wait to see what is accomplished as the discussions are behind closed doors. I have no say in that at all. Of course, Jeremy tells me that he will have no problem helping me fairly, even if the stakes are high. He assures me that he won't do anything to harm my family, although he'll try to get the amount increased, and discreetly, once the final sum is reached, I'll be able to get a share. It makes me feel a little bad. I repeat, but after that, I will have enough to be able to have more stability in my future. I'm looking for less economical residences, but more practical, and who knows? Maybe even a vehicle to match. Update number 3. Well, I just got the impression that things got out of control just a little bit. Please don't fall out of your seats, but somehow or other, the lawyers managed to get the final payment in hand. Well, it is more than double than what was originally asked. In other words, the victim has to be paid the exorbitant amount of $70,000. Which does seem a bit steep to us, but Jeremy told me that he did everything he could to make sure it wasn't that much. My family's devastated, and I admit it's too much even for me. My parents even called me privately and told me that they would have to take steps to get this mess sorted out. They could pay a little more than the original amount, but if we're talking about 70 grand, oh boy, it gets complicated. However, something happened that made me a little upset, and that was that my mother called me to come to the house so that we could continue discussing the matter. There she explained what I already knew. Jeremy had told me a preview of the verdict, and told me that I had to help them make up for what was being asked of Olivia. Now, if he had told me in a better way, I might not have been angry. But I will say his exact words, and I quote, I know we're going through a very tough time, honey, but we need you to take responsibility for the things that have happened. Wait, excuse me? What do they mean by taking responsibility? At what point was this my fault? I commented on that, and her response was, and I quote, You were the one who taught her how to drive, so you need to be aware this involves you too, sweetie. Let's see. I taught Olivia to drive years ago because I was forced to, not for fun, not for enjoyment, and it was a most annoying experience, I promise. As I had to put up with so many super idiotic comments from her, and just because she was reckless enough to drive drunk with damaged lights at night without permission, goodness. I write all this and I can't stop thinking about how stupid the situation was. And yet they went to bring me into it and blame me. It scares me to think in another reality, if they had told me properly along the lines of, Honey, we don't know what to do. We'll have to talk to your sister, but we need your support. And we promise to make it up to you in the future, hand in hand with herself. I might have considered it then, but now that I express it, my blood boils, and the desire to help is driven away. However, it does give me a new idea, but I think it's too early to say it yet. Update number 4. Well, to cope with the whole entire situation of it, my parents decided to take desperate measures, mortgaging our house until at least a certain part of the debt could be compensated. That and taking out larger loans, asking me to cover them on my own. After the conversation with my mother and I had, I was a bit touched in the sense that I was surprised by the way I was blamed for the whole accident. Well, to top it all off, a couple days ago, Olivia posted some stories on the internet where she and her friends were going out for drinks. Can you believe the level of shamelessness this girl has in the middle of the biggest economic conflicts of her life, and by extension family's life, she escapes to enjoy herself as if nothing is going on around her. Come to think of it, I never told you my idea of how I could fix this whole mess, so here it goes. Yes, I will have to help cover the expenses because, well, let's face it, it's an exorbitant amount of money for my parents to cover. But since some of that money will go to me anyways, it doesn't hurt that much. In fact, I even see it as a savings account that will allow me to focus on not splurging more than necessary. Anyways, my idea consists of something I've been trying to do for a while now. Faced with the sea of entrepreneurs in the market, I decided to go for my own business, which would definitely require a lot of work, don't get me wrong, in the beginning, and for that I need all the manpower I can get. That's where my little sister comes in, Olivia. Olivia would serve as my personal assistant day and night, running errands, scheduling appointments, making calls, and managing and advertising strategies. She's well versed in that sort of thing because of all the networking activities she brags about over the years, so it was a no-brainer from my parents forcing her into it. That's right, my little sister is now working for me, and now she will know what revenge truly is. It's already revenge of a different kind, since being at my mercy, she'll be able to know what it's like to have a boss in every sense of the word. She's been spoiled all her life, and it's time for someone to come along and make her understand that nothing is easy. We can't always be given everything, and that everything has a price. Tomorrow will be the first day in my new venture, and although I'll start by giving her small tasks, soon, when she's ready and adapted to the dynamics, I will make her workload almost inhuman. Well, I exaggerate perhaps, but she has to understand the weight of her mistakes and the outside of our family. No one in the world would be helping her besides us. I've talked to Jeremy about all of this, and he keeps apologizing to me for getting it to this point, but hey, I'm an optimistic person, and I understand that sooner or later, an event like this is going to happen for a family to finally understand how wrong they were. Besides, it's a good way to show me as the sensible figure within the family something that was overunderstood for years. Update number 5. Final update by OP. Strap your seatbelts in. Hey guys. Well, it's me again. I'll tell you everything that's happened with Olivia, and you'll be surprised after hearing about an outcome that I never expected. It's been about what? 5 months, maybe? I don't know, since the last update. The joke is that my business is on the rise more than ever, and that's all thanks to teamwork. I understand that you're confused. I would be too based on everything I've written so far, but it's been a long journey, complex, disappointing, and satisfying all the same. So, I start my business and it's all good with that. I had Olivia as my assistant and I put her to sweat it out, sending her out to do difficult jobs that to some extent were standard within the normal production of a company. She made several mistakes in the beginning and I had to scold her for that. She used to tell our parents that I treated her very badly, but when I explained it to them, they realized that she was actually the one who was making mistakes on the job. I feel like the accident opened my parents' heads a little bit, and they stopped putting Olivia inside of a bubble. I continue. The business at first was chaotic. I had to hire 2 other people to keep everything afloat. Sure, there were expenses and a few losses, but I admit, I felt a huge sense of satisfaction during Olivia's first payout. She came me asking, "I'm sorry, but it's already the middle of the month." And I said, "So?" "Well, I wanted to know when and how I was going to get paid." "I'm sorry, but remember what we talked about with Mom and Dad? Your payments would be sent directly to the compensation account." You would have seen her face, you would not have believed it. She later told my parents, and although they tried to advocate for her, I put my foot down. After all, I was the boss. So you could say my word was final. Did it hurt? Not even in the least. Same when she asked me for a night off to go to a party, but I told her right away that I would need her in the office until very late. I feel that made a dent in her because the next day she woke up a little grumpy, but very, very quiet. From that day on, she started to put fewer excuses in the works. Even after a few months, she began to contribute some ideas that, according to her, she had reserved for a very long time, but she was afraid to comment on them because they were not good enough. To be honest, they were very, very good, I'll admit. And, well, we used them for the following projects. And in fact, we started to have an incredible boom in social network structures, and that's what transmitted in more and more sales. My parents were excited about Olivia's performance in the work field, even more than their daughter, who owned the business they were in. It just showed that she would always be in my younger sister's shadow. And as ugly as it sounds with the sales we had, I didn't mind that slogan too much. Actually, as strange as it sounds, this whole experience brought Olivia and I close, to the point where we could argue one day at night, share a beer. Something that even in my wildest dreams I could never have conceived. While that did end up bringing us a lot closer, there came a point where this sudden bonding would be necessary for something big. Throughout my life, I looked at Olivia sideways, even generating a massive hatred for my own sister, but the real culprits were others, and I say this because a few days ago, Olivia came into my office saying she needs to talk about something very important. She asked me if my parents had asked me to sign some papers a while back. I thought it was something routine from the savings I was passing on to them for debt, but Olivia told me the truth. Those papers were a loan in your name. I stopped what I was doing to stare at her, asking her to please explain. Well, our parents have been taking out several loans to get out of debt faster, and this time they used you to ask for something else, charging you directly from bank account. I swear I was speechless and open-mouthed. Then Olivia pulled something out of her folder. They were the papers I signed. I was stunned. She said, well, I got them back before they took them to the bank. This would help us get out of our debt faster, but it's not fair. This situation involves only me, and I told them, well, that's what left would have come from, not you. You have nothing to do with it. Suffice to say that I faced my parents about it with Olivia as my backup. It was a sour confrontation, and I even mentioned the possibility of a lawsuit. I mean, yeah, they're my parents, but we're talking about making me sign something I wasn't even aware of. They were screaming, tears, mostly from them, but when I confessed to them the helplessness I had my whole life concerning Olivia, they seemed to get smaller and smaller because they knew it was true. I tell all this very lightly, but seriously, I thought I was going to explode by then. Olivia supported me by saying that since she had started working with me, she had learned the value of daily living. She confessed to my parents about showing me the papers. I planned to tell them I was aware of it from the beginning, she told me, and that the ramifications of these actions can bring tons of legal trouble, going by my side. This made me see that the girl has indeed matured, and in a sense she was proud to have been part of the process. Nowadays, well, I'm a little embarrassed to say it, I will only comment that the debt has been paid off, and the sessions with lawyers are over. Yet, since then, both my sister and I have cut our parents out of our life completely. They urge me to forgive them and offer an apology for their deeds, but I refuse to their face. So now they're calling my sister, but she also refuses to pick up their calls. Our business is going from strength to strength, discussing expanding horizons in a 2-year plan of action. Well, thanks to the secret savings funds I had. The plan I had was still in place, and Jeremy passed on the difference of money to me after it was all said and done. Oh, by the way, his leg is much better now, to the point where he goes to the gym every day. I know because I go with him. As a matter of fact, we've kept up on communications a bit more and decided to go on a date for a couple of weeks now. I know, it sounds weird, but life is weird. I don't know how to tell Olivia that the guy responsible for one of the most turbulent times in our lives is now dating me. Well, I guess I'll figure that out sometime later. I always figure something out. Alright guys, so that wraps up the story. Make sure you subscribe just in case, well, there's an update and OP decides to tell her sister that she's now dating the one guy who tried to ruin their life after he was crushed by a car. Now let's go ahead and head over to Mr. Reddito's live studio for some upcoming comments. Comment number 1 says, "What a messed up family dynamic. I mean, oh my goodness, it was a total train wreck reading through this whole thing. I guess the only good thing to this story is, well, OP and her sister rekindled and finally went ahead and cut off their toxic parents. I would not have gone that long before I cut them off, but hey, it is what it is." So guys, it just keeps going, comment after comment, people talking about how OP was basically putting up with way too much crap. What would you do? If you were in OP's position, would you go about this any differently? Drop your comments down below. Let's discuss it in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito. I animate stories every single day, and I narrate them as well, so come on, step by, see what the topic is, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic day.